sort of giving you a heads up on it. Good evening, Council. We'd like to reconvene our meeting for tonight. We've had an in-camera and also a presentation with Calvin Scott at 6:30, and that was a little bit earlier. So we are on to a moment of reflection before we get into approval of the agendas. So we will start with a moment and then carry on from there. All right, so tonight's first order of business is approval of the agendas, or next order of business, approval of agendas. Motion to approve the consent agenda. Councillor Edwards makes a motion. If there's no further discussion, call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And approval of our regular meeting agenda. I've heard of no adjustments or changes. So a motion to approve as presented. Councillor Monteith makes a motion. Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And for the good of council, does anyone have something they would like to share with the whole of council? Councillor Edwards.
I just wanted to say that I drove past the Foothill Center the other day and saw how awesome their addition is looking there, and I believe they're to the point where they're painting and stuff inside, so it's getting close to completion and it looks really great, and so I can imagine that that's going to be a great asset to the members of our community, and it looks really good, so congratulations to them.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments for the good of council? Councillor Orr.
One of the first signs of spring is when the street sweeper comes out and starts to clean up. And I've noticed that spring is here. And so thanks to our Fort Macleod crew for the work that they do with keeping the town beautiful.
I would second that for sure. Any other comments? Councillor
Sorry,
Edwards?
I just also wanted to say how much I'm enjoying seeing everybody out and about and walking and playing at the parks and making use of the basketball hoops. And I may have, pulled a muscle or two myself trying to pretend I still knew how to play basketball. So it's been really nice to have such good weather, and we're very fortunate to be in a community that has great facilities that our community members can use. And so yeah, it's been really great to see everybody out, and hopefully we're still maintaining our distance, but able to enjoy the weather and remember that we're all part of the same community. So it's good.
Thank you. I was going to echo that. I know we took in some of the river bottom parks pathways, and so amazing actually the opportunity we have with our park system in town. So definitely want to make use of that. All right, any other comments? Seeing none, we will move on to our delegation portion of the meeting tonight. We have tonight with us an outdoor pool check presentation with the Métis Nation of Alberta Local 1880. And I was going to ask if Lisa or someone want to introduce the group. Miranda's going to introduce.
Good evening, Council. I will introduce to you from the Métis Nation of Alberta Local 1880. We have Leslie Volk and Christina Fox here to present a check for $2,000.
And very good.
On behalf of the Métis Nation of Alberta and Local 1880, we would like to present the town with $2,000 that will go towards the pool project.
I was wondering if you can give us a little bit of a background on the Métis Nation 1880. Like, would you be?
I'm just a board member at the Local 1880. Actually, my grandpa Gordon Campbell started the local in Lethbridge 2003, and he also started the local in Pincher Creek 1880. And the Métis are part of the First Nations through Canada, and our ancestors come from Manitoba, Louis Riel, and yeah, there's just various backgrounds from being Scottish to Irish. Yeah, just there's lots of to look up.
Lots of history. Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I think it's a good opportunity to share a little bit about your organization too.
Can you give us just a little bit of a sense for how you raised the funds that you've raised?
The executive board, so the president decided, and the board decided that we had enough funds to allocate to the town, to the project pool, and we decided that it was a good idea as where our local is a large area in southern Alberta, so we go right from Claresholm, I believe, right down to Cardston, and we also include Crowsnest Pass. And so Lethbridge local goes from Lethbridge all the way up to, I believe it's Vulcan, and East, Raymond, all in there. Yeah, so.
Well, on behalf of council, we want to say thank you for your support for the pool, and we definitely appreciate what you do. So I believe we want to, yeah, very good. We'll take All right, next order of business is we have a delegation with us tonight. We look forward to hearing from Shannon Frank. I think it's a long time coming, but we look forward to hearing from the Oldman Watershed Council tonight, and for council to be able to ask any questions when the presentation is done. So Shannon, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry we had to reschedule this a couple of times, but we made it, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for your time. First, I want to thank you for donating to the Old Man Watershed Council this year. As always, we really appreciate your support, and wanted to give you a bit of an idea of where it goes towards. First and foremost, I want you to know that we leverage your funds into many more funds, and we're able to do that through matching grants, and that really helps us show our grant funders that we have broad community support across the whole watershed. Also, because of the unrestricted funds we receive from municipalities and irrigation districts, we are able to kind of cover the gaps in between the grants that we receive. Sometimes, you know, there's quite a few months delay when you apply for a grant, wait to hear back and such. So that really helps. And also, a lot of government grants won't cover certain things, so having your donations really helps us cover those and makes a big difference. We have quite a few towns and villages in the city of Lethbridge that do donate to us every year, and we want to recognize all of them and say thank you. Our board of directors is made up of 19 seats that bring all perspectives to the table. So we have a towns and villages seat. Right now it's filled by Mayor Blair Painter from Crow's Nest Pass. So he is always there if you have any questions or concerns or topics that you want to bring up. And we also have seats for all levels of government, First Nations, health, industry, environment, etc., to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table. And that's really important to us, and that's kind of the foundation of our organization, is that kind of collaboration and collective action. One of the topics that we've been working on as of late is the coal mining that I'm sure you've heard lots about in the news. And as I'm sure you know, there's 2 coal mines that are currently being reviewed by provincial and federal governments. And so we've been participating in those processes and giving them feedback from our stakeholders and environmental information as well. We review the environmental impact assessments and provide feedback on those. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I don't want to get way into this because we only have 15 minutes, but I'm happy to answer questions. We've been primarily just providing information in a neutral fashion and trying to bring all perspectives to the table as we do. We're not advocating for any specific side, of course, and we're pointing out some gaps that we did find in the environmental impact assessment and asked for those to be filled, such as through improved monitoring, for example. And the Grassy Mountain Mine, we expect a decision in September at the earliest, and we'll keep providing information as it becomes available about that. The Tent Mountain Mine is the other one that's being reviewed. They only just started the process and submitted a terms of reference for the environmental impact assessment, and comments on that are due April 5th. And so we're providing information about that and encouraging people to come to their own conclusions and send in their own feedback. They're both in Crow's Nest Pass. Tent Mountain is right along the BC border. They actually have land in both BC and Alberta.
Could you explain to us, and again, just inquiring as to the mandate of your organization, but how you arrive at the conclusion of not to advocate for approval or rejection? Is that part of your position as an organization that you won't take a position on such issues, or is it this one in particular? If you could just explain to me
sure.
more about that.
Absolutely. So it's a function of our organization in general that we don't take positions, be, because we're intended to be a forum for all perspectives to talk about these tough issues. And you know, if we started taking sides on different things, then people wouldn't trust us to be that forum for everybody. And so we have to be very careful in how we talk about these issues so that everybody feels included and welcome, and so that no matter what the issue is, they know that they can trust what we're saying, that we don't have an agenda. As like, we're one of 11 watershed councils in Alberta, and we're actually a partner of the government of Alberta, and they set up the watershed councils in the way that they did with having all the seats on the board of directors. That's a requirement of watershed councils, that they have seats at the table for everybody. And so it's a function of our role and our makeup. It's not just this topic. Yeah, no problem. The other sort of related but not completely just about coal is the water allocation order that I'm sure you've also been hearing about in the news. And so we were approached about the proposed changes to that order, and we had a meeting with the government about that, and also providing feedback on that. And whoops, I keep going the wrong way. There we go. And again, I won't get into the details, but basically we've been sharing information because there's a lot of confusion. It's a very confusing topic, water allocation, and helping people understand what the order is and what any changes could mean. And we have a lot more information about this on our website as well, and about coal mining. On our blogs, we have I think about 5 blogs now on this topic. As far as we've been told, if any changes are going to happen, there will be more consultation. Like, this is just very initial stages. So we're waiting to see when that would be announced. But basically, there is concerns about how it might impact the health of our streams, because this could impact some of the smaller creeks and rivers upstream of the Oldman Reservoir. But I'll just leave that and answer any questions that you have. But because of where you are on the Oldman River, I should, of course, mention that you know, coal mines do have the potential to impact the Oldman River. We don't know exactly what that would look like without knowing the details of whether they're approved and whether the water treatment plant processes that they're proposing will work. Of course, everyone, you know, if they are approved, it's going to be very important that they do work. And we have seen some promising processes that have been working for the past couple of years at the Teck mines, but they haven't been proven for 30 years. It's only been a couple of years, and that's why there's such concern. And so we've been talking to our folks about water treatment and learning about that. And as far as we can tell from the folks we've talked to, there's no easy way to treat selenium in particular in your water treatment plant and in other towns and cities. And so that's one of the concerns, is how far potential selenium contamination could travel downstream. And so that's the one big topic that we're paying a lot of attention to, and trying to make sure that the science is understood about the water treatment processes that are needed. Tell you about some of our other projects as well. So we have been restoring stream banks in the mostly on public land in the headwaters for about 5-6 years now with our partners, and we continue to do that every fall. Primarily, it's just by planting willows and trees and getting volunteers out to do that, and training summer students and college students how to do that. And it's really the best way to prevent erosion and improve the habitat for some of the fish that are at risk. And we've been spending a lot of time as part of this project educating folks that are out in the backcountry about how to behave responsibly, pick up your garbage, don't spread weeds, use bridges, wheels out of water, that sort of thing. So we set up these pop-up education stations. You can see one in the photo there by the lake. And then we ask people to pledge to an action to take care of the places that they love. Because research has always shown that if you can get someone to pledge to an action, they're much more likely to actually do it. And so then we share those photos on social media. And it's a fun way to get families involved. And you can see the kids there pledging to clean up their campsite. Another one of our projects is with the Piikani Nation and Kainai Nation. We've been supporting them to do range and riparian health assessments on their grasslands and stream banks. And they're also doing some really amazing work on restoration, collecting seeds and restoring grasslands with the native seeds that they collect. And we also did some aquatic monitoring training together where we are using invertebrates that live on the bottom of creeks to see how healthy the water is. And these are really cool projects that are really important, not just for the watershed and the environment, but for our doing our part for truth and reconciliation. It stopped. I think so. Okay. Our Watershed Legacy program continues. That's where we provide small grants to watershed stewardship groups, landowners, and other small groups that are doing kind of boots on the ground restoration projects. A lot of what we fund is riparian fencing to keep cattle out of creeks, putting in off-stream watering systems to attract cattle away from water, and like the tire trough in the picture, so they can drink out of a clean tire instead of going in the creek. It's better for them, and it's better for the creek. We support things like weed pulls and garbage pickups, and educational tours, that sort of thing. And so that's been going, this is I think in its 10th year now. So we've had about 65 projects so far, and we do more every year. And we have, thank you, a lot of good support from our rural municipalities for that project and our irrigation districts. So we want to thank them. We also do youth education. This kind of went off the rails when COVID hit because we weren't allowed to go in schools, and that's been a challenge ever since. But we been switching to virtual presentations and trying to lead activities virtually. And so we're getting that going instead, and still a really important project for us. We have a couple of new projects this year. This one is our Uniting Rural Producers and Urban Consumers project. So this is all about making sure that rural and urban people have good relationships and are working together to solve problems, and not pointing fingers at each other. that people understand where their food comes from, how water is used to grow food, etc. And we recently did a survey of consumers to understand their attitudes and views and what influences their food choices. And we're using that information now to design the project, which involves going to local businesses like bakeries and restaurants to eat food and showcase where it's made and how it's made and support those local businesses as well. And we're going to make that into like a video series and accompanied by some blogs and other virtual written materials. And lastly, we started the water quality monitoring project using the invertebrates. After we did the training with our Indigenous partners, we started collecting the samples last fall. We did 7 sites in the headwaters, and we're still waiting for the results because they actually have to like count all the bugs under a microscope and classify them by the like taxonomy of them. And it's very complicated, but anyway, they haven't sent us the results yet, but the bugs tell us how healthy the creek is, because certain bugs will live in clean water, certain bugs will live in less clean water, etc. And so we can't wait for that. And they also use DNA analysis, so it's kind of one of the new scientific breakthroughs that's happening in the environmental world. So that's been really cool. Whoops, wrong way. Okay. And lastly, I just wanted to let you know that there's lots of ways to keep in touch. We have a monthly newsletter. We're on most of the social media sites. You can sign up for a free membership. It automatically renews now, so you don't have to keep filling out the form every year. And there's lots of information on our website, particularly on our blog. That's where we post like the latest news about topics of discussion like coal mines, and that's where you can find reliable information. So check that out, and otherwise I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon. Does council have any questions? Administration? I think some of our interest was understanding, obviously we have a river going directly through our municipality. It's, I think from boundary to boundary, we're 3 miles? Yeah, 3 miles, 3 quarters, right? So maybe a mile and a half through the boundary. And sometimes we were curious what earth opportunities we as a community could work with Old Man Watershed Council on doing more awareness for the river bottom or cleanup days or something, I'm not sure. So I don't know if you can comment on what opportunities or what examples other communities might be doing to better protect their watershed.
So quite a few communities basically invite us to their events so that we can put on some kind of educational opportunity. Like we have activities that families can do, or you know, we organize a garbage cleanup or a weed pull, and we can help with that. Like we have supplies, we have kits that we can loan folks, like with garbage bags and gloves. We often go to events like Canada Day, those types of things, and then we can do activities there. So that's kind of an easy one. We also support like small grants to communities. So if you wanted to do something more on your own, we can possibly support that. We often are just a resource of information, so people come to us with kind of an idea or a problem, and we kind of just help make something happen. Just really depends on your situation. I would say because you have the beautiful river valley, that's probably what we often find in river valleys is weeds. That is often an issue. So we do a lot of weed pulls in river valleys. We plant willows and trees as well. If there was like an erosion problem or something like some kind of bare spot that was a problem, we could do that. It's really fun. It's really hard work. It involves a lot of sledgehammering, but it's lots of fun. Usually it happens in the snow. Yeah. So you have to wait for willows to go dormant, and then you cut them and you like hammer them into the ground. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me. But yeah, it's like we try to just really be flexible and open to helping and supporting people. So if you have an idea or a problem, then we could go from there.
I don't know that we are aware of any serious problems with the river through our river bottom. I think a lot of it's keeping it clean. That's probably like anywhere. Any
That's
other comments,
Good news.
ideas, questions?
I would just mention that the Environment Committee is very aware of weed control issues in the river bottom, and as well cleanup, and have organized some different projects to try to deal with those kinds of things. And so you're saying that sometimes with weed control, it's just identifying what weeds are weeds. And there is some expertise on the Environment Committee now, but that's something that I'm assuming you would have information on as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other one that I'm sure you've heard about is the aquatic invasive mussels and weeds that we want to keep out of the actual water. That's important too if you have a boat launch. The government has free signage we could put up about making sure people like are checking their boats and cleaning their boats properly, like even dinghies and kayaks and canoes. There's like a lot of free resources to keep the mussels out of Alberta because they would cost millions of dollars a year.
Sue, you had a question?
Thank you. We were just having a quick glance here about maybe tying something in with our community day and getting you guys to come out and be a participant in that with Fortis as well as the town and the volunteers that we bring together. Maybe that's something we can have a further discussion about a little bit later.
For sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Very good. Any other comments? No, I don't think so. So we'll stay in touch. Obviously, I think we get your emails. I believe Councillor Wolstenholme sits on the board, and I believe our membership and our donations have been current. So thank you for what you do, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right. Next order of business tonight are public hearings. We have 3 tonight. So we will go through them one by one, I believe, and if administration could introduce the bylaw and/or Gavin Scott, then we will go from there. So tonight we'll start with public hearing for bylaw 1926. If I can get a motion to open the public hearing, and then Councillor Wolstenholme makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Our Director of Operations, Adrian, did you want to introduce this bylaw tonight?
Got it this week. Thank you, Council. So this is the continuance and second and third reading for bylaw 1926. Now, the recommendation as presented was submitted a couple weeks ago. Now, keeping in mind some of the consideration council had over the last week, perhaps we would suggest that council postpone third reading so that we can have further time to explore the issues.
Very good. So motion, we are in a public hearing, so we will ask for anyone that's wishing to speak for or against this bylaw. It's our water utility services bylaw. Anyone here wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1926? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing for bylaw 1926. Councillor Orr makes the motion. Call to question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Motion to open the public hearing for bylaw 1927. Councillor Wolstenau makes that motion, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Adrian, our Director of Operations, Adrian, would you like to introduce this bylaw?
Yes, this is bylaw 1927. This is the amendment to bylaw 1805, Schedule A. And we're just asking for council to call for a continuance of the public hearing and do second and third reading.
Okay, being this is a continuance of our public hearing, is there anyone wishing to speak for or against this bylaw? Seeing none, ask for a motion to close the public hearing for bylaw 1927. Councillor Edwards makes a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Bylaw 1928, it's to add a land use, add use to a zoning district. Ask for a motion to open public hearing for bylaw 1928. Councillor Van Agenbos makes a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Being the public hearing is open, I would ask if Gavin Scott can introduce this bylaw to us tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw 1928 introduces a new definition to the land use bylaw for community resource facility. And it introduces it into 4 districts: the commercial central district, commercial general district, the business industrial district, and the industrial general district. This new use addresses community-oriented services, and it was duly advertised March 10th and 17th, and is here for public hearing and recommendation for second and third tonight.
Very good, thank you very much. Is anyone here wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1928? And seeing no one here, we will ask for a motion to close the public hearing for bylaw 1928. Councillor Edwards makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So under consideration of delegations or of the public hearings we've just
Brand,
had.
sorry, Mayor Fader, there's
Yes.
4 public hearings tonight. Bylaw 1929 is also a public hearing.
I wish I had that on my agenda. Is it in the Dropbox? Oh. Maybe it was. It was probably a recent addition to the. Okay, I'll grab it. I think it must have been recently added or after I downloaded my Dropbox. So it's not on the agenda, but it's in the Dropbox. Sorry. I'd be more than happy to add that for you, Chris. Yeah.
It wasn't on my either, Brett, so.
Yeah. That's all good. So we do have a fourth public hearing tonight for bylaw 1929, which is Manning Avenue 9th Street Engineered Structures Upgrade. I believe this is our debenture bylaw. I will ask for a motion from council to open the public hearing for bylaw 1929. Councillor Edwards makes a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And I will ask our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck, to introduce this bylaw to us.
Thank you, Council. Bylaw 1929 is the debenture bylaw for Manning Avenue and 9th Street engineered structure upgrade. The debenture that's set out in the bylaw is for $2,942,000. It has been advertised in the local paper for 2 consecutive weeks, and the 15-day petition period started on March 11th. So we will not be considering this bylaw for second and third reading tonight. It will be considered at the March 29th special council meeting because we have to wait till the 15-day petition period ends on March 25th. That's all I have to say.
Great. Just saving this agenda quick. So, can you, sorry, I missed the last part. You're not asking for second and third reading?
No, not tonight. We'll be doing second and third reading at the special council meeting next Monday.
Okay. Okay, so strictly a public hearing. So the public hearing is open for bylaw 1929. Is anyone wishing to speak for or against this bylaw? Seeing none, I'll request a motion from council to close the public hearing for this public hearing. Councillor Van Hagemas makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, going to consideration of the public hearings that we just had. Bylaw 1926, our water utility services bylaw, originally requested for second and third reading tonight. There's been some communication back and forth regarding the rate for some of the larger users or a small amount of larger users. Is there any discussion on that before, or actually perhaps a motion to go to second reading first, and we can have some discussion once the motion's on the floor as well? Councillor Edwards makes a motion for second reading on bylaw 1926. Any further discussion? Councillor
I would simply point out, and I know that there's been some discussion about that issue that you described, and I am just curious on the timing or the effect on timing for the passing of the bylaw as the proposed fees were to come into effect April 1st. What's the impact of postponing third reading upon that implementation date?
Well, it would really depend on how quickly we are able to communicate with council and have that discussion, perhaps a tabletop exercise of what that would look like. And then we would have to pick a date in terms of when those fees would get introduced. So it would be deferred. To what date is kind of to be determined at this point.
Okay. Okay, any other comments or discussion? Councillor Ward, did you have any more thoughts in terms of how you would like to proceed? Because we can do 3 readings tonight, the second and third reading if council so wishes. I think there's some concern that small amount of large users will have a significant increase into their water utility costs, which is a core part of their business, and I think that was the bulk of our concern. The rest of it, I think, is I've not heard any other concerns I don't know if council's heard from anyone else or administration regarding the advertising that's been done. The submissions in the newspaper, everything's gone out in utility bills. So I think that information has been presented well. So, Councillor Edwards?
I'm just wondering, I know that a large part of the concern was not particularly for this year, but for the years when it increases again and again, in 2022 and 2023. So I'm wondering if the initial bylaw, like if we can move forward with it, and yet we still have time to, is it the schedule that just would need to be amended? Or would the entire bylaw? Because I guess that's my question, because to defeat the bylaw for a small subsection of users that we need to maybe make some additional space for within the bylaw seems a little bit just a waste of everybody's time, because you guys have put so much work into this. But if there's a way to move it forward and yet still take into account those that will be impacted in such a great way that still allows everything to truck along.
It's a good point. If council wish to sort of take out 2022 and 2023, the rest of the bylaw could proceed as is, theoretically, so that is an option.
I would just confirm that, you know, the question or concern that I have raised and that we've discussed somewhat is that second and third year for those that we've been referring to as heavy commercial users, and the increase in that 2022, 23 year, is that correct? That is my primary concern. I'm very pleased with the bylaw generally and that which is proposed. I have no issues with that at all. I've simply been concerned about how that increase for those heavy users in that second and third year of implementation would put us at a point where we're considerably at the higher end of cost for water for those users compared to other municipalities. I too am sensitive about derailing the process and not being able to move forward as planned on the April 1st date, and so I appreciate Councillor Edwards' query on that. I had this similar query as to whether or not we can still somehow proceed, because I'm certainly in favor of proceeding with that, with the rates that are proposed for this year. And if we can somehow proceed on that basis and give us some time, I'm hesitant to put forward a motion that would somehow try to address that changing of the rate for the 22-23 year for that small group, because I think it needs to be more thought out and defined than what we could come up with a motion here on the floor. So, you know, I realize that if we take off from the rates year 22 and year 23, that takes away some certainty for people. But I would hope that we could maybe address those subsequent years, perhaps in weeks or at most months, so that we can provide that certainty.
Councillor Wolsnow?
I agree with David with that, exactly with what he said. I think that's very reasonable.
Councillor Edwards?
I'm wondering too if we can just, if we were to make an adjustment to the bylaw, if we just took the 22 and 23 rates from the non-residential, if we kept, the residential can stay the same for the 22, 23, we don't need to make any changes there. We're all, I think that that's consistent, and we're happy with what that looks like, and there's no issue there. It's just the commercial users that need a little bit more investigation and maybe a little bit of a change to the rate. So I'm just wondering if that's a possibility.
Councillor Monteith?
Just in regards to Christie's comment, it's all tied together though, because we're looking at the same amount of revenue. So if we're adjusting one, the other's affected, so I'm not sure if that works. But further to that, this is one issue that I can't really get a grip on in terms of what I think. economically, in most businesses, the more volume you have, the cheaper the price, because economies of scale and whatever. Yet I also understand user pay. So I'm having a tough time coming to grips where I exactly sit on that. So I'm stumped, but I do like the idea of just doing the 1 year, because in comparing it to other communities, it fits. It doesn't look like it fits in years 2 and 3, and that worries me a bit.
Councillor Venables?
I agree with Councillor Monteith on the user pay aspect. I'm in line with the rest of council on the current year, 100%. My views have always been on seeing the actual results of this before we initiate step 2 or 3, year 2 and 3. But as such, I agree with the majority of council on the first year, and I think there should be consideration or further discussion regarding a few of our bigger users, a few of our higher consumers. And I do think that the usage won't necessarily go down based on our increased assessment, increased consumption. Maybe per sector it'll go down, but I feel that this has it may result in a higher revenue in this department, which to me would result in us having to look at year 2 and 3. And I know we look at it from a comparable, as a comparable to other communities, and I'm all about being in line with our neighboring municipalities, but it doesn't mean we always have to do that unless there's reason to. So I feel with year 1, we should, but year 2 and 3 really depend on the information, the actuals of the first year increase. That's always been my position. But
I would just also make the observation, and I appreciate that administration has set these rates over a 3-year period to work towards the point where we are making this transition to a more consumption rate policy or bylaw. And so I appreciate that an interruption doesn't get us to where you want to go, but I'm hoping that perhaps with more information with these new rates implemented this year, that we can still do that calculation perhaps based upon more actual numbers as opposed to projections. So I'm sympathetic to the challenges of not setting it out for the 3 years, but I'm hopeful that we can still accomplish those purposes by securing the first year, setting the rates for the first year, and then looking and seeing what we do for the years that follow.
I think my biggest challenge is seeing the jump from 1 month to the next. It's 2.5 times the cost for some of the larger users to go from our current rate to the proposed rate, which is not an easy pill to swallow when that's the bulk of what you're doing in your business. So I'm not sure. I do agree we need to head into the dollar direction. Is there any interest from council to doing 75 cents for at least the first year so we can get a better handle and a little bit more ability for some of the businesses to ease into the new rates instead of jumping that high in one jump?
What is the rate right now?
$1. Oh, currently.
No, currently, what are we paying right now?
0.52 for under 125, and then it goes to 0.27 for over 350 meters.
So those big commercial users are getting a punch to the gut as far as water.
It's not a small amount.
No.
If you look at it monthly, it's in a year it could take $25,000 to $30,000 extra for some business.
Are you proposing that we do 75 cents across the board or just commercially?
Just commercially. And we could always tie it to users that average over a certain amount too. That makes it a little hard to do, but I would have to rely on administration whether they'd be able to do that easy enough.
Of course, one of the challenges with that is that the proposed rates, the proposed consumption rate and the flat rate has been adjusted because of the change in the consumption. And so if you simply reduce the consumption rate, in addition to a reduced flat rate, then you've upset the balance. And as well, we're dealing with, for most commercial users, the jump is not that significant. Correct? And so, yeah, I mean, there's been the advertising process, there's been notice given. That transition is not an unknown. We are taking into account the impact on our heavy commercial users by postponing that transition to a higher rate. So I'm sympathetic to that. I appreciate that, but I think I'd be reluctant to look at a further easing or modification to that first year proposal.
Councillor Edwards?
I'm just wondering if we've had any other feedback from any other of those, I think there's 7 that are in the higher 7 or 8-ish.
There's one above that 1,000 cubic meters. There's between, I think, 5 or 6 that are within, 500 and 1,000.
Okay, so I'm just curious if we've heard, if it's just one out of the 6 or 7 that have the potential, if we've just heard from the one user.
That's very likely, yes.
I was just
And
wondering if-
understandably so, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just, like, I feel for that individual and for their business. But at the same time, there are other commercial users that are using lots of water too, and they've all had an opportunity to speak up and to say, and they haven't made the opportunity, taken the opportunity to, speak against what we're doing. So I just want to make sure that we're not overcomplicating it for one business, even though I do completely empathize with them.
Yeah, I think I completely understand that. I think the challenge is most of those, all of the other users except the one, have more value that they're adding to their operations with other things, right? So this one's, it's strictly reliant on heavy volume of water, and that's where the challenge becomes.
I still lean towards passing the bylaw as is, but removing 2022 and 2023 from the schedule.
For non-res.
Yeah,
For non-res water only.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion?
Does that not work? Or 2022, 2023 for the entire thing? We can't, it doesn't really work, right? When we only remove commercial because it's one big ball of wax. Okay, so it has to be the full thing. It can't just be commercial. We need to do both residential and commercial. So it's either all of it gets passed or all of it gets removed for the future years at this point.
In the schedule, could you not leave? Well, yeah, because you're doing a 3-year planning. You could adjust it in the budget to show it stay at $1 for the next 3 years, and then always redo the bylaw too. That is an option too, right?
Yeah, in terms of the rate structure, we can certainly adjust it. I would suggest if we're going to remove 2022 and 2023, we just do it all. So that's consistent, easier to process, doesn't necessarily upset our balance between the flat rate and the consumption rate as well. So.
Okay. Councillor Edwards?
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but so what's the process then moving forward? Because the bylaw would be in place, but the schedule would need adjusting. That doesn't mean we have to redo the bylaw, right? We can adjust the schedule still, so that doesn't affect anything moving forward.
Okay, any other questions, debate, discussion?
Can I adjust my motion then? Because my motion was for second reading. Or do it in the third reading?
We can do it in the third reading. Okay. So the motion's on the floor for second reading of the proposed bylaw 1926. Is there any further discussion?
Just a question.
Yeah.
If we defeat this motion, then it kills everything, right?
Yeah, we don't want to defeat this reading. I think we would either delay third reading if we want to have more discussion. Okay, all right. If there's no further discussion, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Anyone wishing to make a motion for a third reading of bylaw 1926?
So making the motion for third reading, but removing 2022 and 2023 from the fee schedule.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Motion is on the floor. Any further discussion? None? Debates, questions for administration? Questions from administration? I was considering whether making a motion, oh, Adrian, Pedro?
Hello? There we go. Going forward, how does council want to do it if we're removing, what would the timeline be for looking at those 2022 and 2023 rates?
You mean after this
Right.
discussion, what happens next?
Right, I'd like some direction on that.
Right,
we
so
can.
bringing it back to council to discuss. Because we can add the second and third reading to, would be a new bylaw then, right? If we did want to add the second and third year to
It
this
would be
bylaw.
just the schedule amendment,
Okay.
yeah.
Right, so then the fee schedule would come back for. So,
Sure.
and when, I think we do want it to come back for further discussion. Councillor Monteith?
I think we'd want to wait long enough that we had some financial information of how it's actually working. Because I think that's key. I agree with Marco that that's the key.
So if revenues are way higher than normal, that we should have that info so we can adjust accordingly, or the other way around?
And yet, I would think that we would look to address that prior to the 2022 year. So,
Yeah.
by the fall or something, if we've got some information there so that we're not automatically just carrying over into 2022, 2023 based on these current rates.
So are you suggesting then before the election or after?
I was just gonna say, the first meeting in November.
Yes, because I think we'll have more information by that point. It's just your timeline.
We won't be starting the budget
Because-
process later this year anyway.
Because these rates are only passed for 2021, so it will have to be dealt with in some way.
Okay. Councillor Monteith, you good?
6 months is September, which should give us I guess water's more used in the summer than the winter, but we can should be able to project some other usage. So I would think after September.
Either way, future council could cancel this bylaw and do a new one either way, so it's, yeah, all right. Okay, so that's discussion. Is there, if there's no interest for adjusting it lower than $1, I was thinking of making a motion to amend the bylaw, and then we can actually discuss it there, but I don't know that we have to. Because if there's not... Okay. So the motion's on the floor to pass bylaw 1926, removing 2022 and 2023 rates, and those would come back once more info before the next fiscal year starts. So the motion's on the floor. Any further discussion? Call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Carrying on to bylaw 1927, if I can get a motion from council for second reading of bylaw 1927. Councilor Orr makes a motion. Director of Operations, Adrian Pedro, did you have anything you'd like to add before we... This one's a little simpler.
Yeah, this is just a simple schedule amendment. To note, we didn't receive any comments about this one, so
okay,
if that helps.
No comments, no feedback at the public hearing. Quite a bit simpler change. Any debate, discussion? Councilor Orr?
Just one question. Given what we've just done to the water rates bylaw, does that have any impact on these rates, the 2022, 2023 rates? I wouldn't think that they do. I wouldn't think that would be looking to change these rates based on what might be decided 6 to 8 months from now. But I thought I'd ask the question whether there was any impact, because these two bylaws are in a sense connected in terms of our overall outcome for the ratepayer.
Good question. I would suggest that there's no reason to withdraw 2022 and 2023. So as council can recall, the initial intent with adjusting these rates was for each utility to be self-sustaining. So this 3-year projection here is to achieve that goal. It's not so much linked to the water consumption at this point. If we had sewer consumption based on water consumption, then that's a different discussion we would have to have. But
I would like to add that, because I know with our overall discussion, our idea was to try to increase our sewer revenue and decrease water to some degree. And when we advertised it sewer and water combined. So if we're suggesting for water, we're not sure on the rates moving forward because we're actually reducing the flat rate, increasing consumption rates. So in some ways they're tied together, because if we kept the rates the same on water and changed them on sewer, the net effect is that likely the same for the average user?
I would say that statement would be correct, assuming that the impacts to any future water rate changes affect the entire town. But my impression thus far, we're going to be looking at changing it for users, 5 to 6 users as opposed to the whole town. So I'm not sure if that statement really applies.
Okay. Right. So motion is on the floor for second reading of bylaw 1927. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We'll entertain a motion for third reading of bylaw 1927. Councilor Wolstenholme makes the motion. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Bylaw 1928, which is adding a use to our zoning district. We've had the public hearing. Gavin Scott with ORSC has introduced this. Is anyone prepared to make a motion for second reading on this bylaw? Councillor Edwards makes that motion. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Motion for third reading. Councillor Orr will make that motion. Any discussion? questions on this bylaw? No other comments from administration? We'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, we are carrying on to bylaw 1900, which is a road closure bylaw, second and third reading. We will ask Gavin Scott to speak to this for us.
Yes, bylaw 1900 has had a long road. The Catholic Church alley is proposed to be closed. It was offered up at public hearing in December and has taken the ministry 2 months to sign the document, and it is here for you to pass second and third.
Very well, I will entertain a motion for second reading onto bylaw 1900. Councillor Van Hagenbos makes a motion. Any questions? Any discussion? No one wants to delay this more? Then we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Request for a motion to go to third reading on bylaw 1900. Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, thank you, Gavin, for making the journey out tonight. Enjoy your trip home. All right, new business tonight. We have billboard design, and we are going to ask administration to present, and I believe Angie O'Connor will be doing that with us tonight. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you've seen before you, the reply from the letter that Sue sent the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Something I thought was quite interesting that came out in the news today from Minister Ahir on International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which was yesterday. I just kind of wanted to read some of her words, which I think echo a lot of what the Diversity and Inclusion Committee like everybody to believe in. The responsibility to prevent and end racism falls to every one of us. We must continue to focus on ways we can end racism and hatred in Alberta. Each step leads us to a better, more inclusive province in which all Albertans feel valued, respected, and supported. And so that's one of the ideas with the billboard design. Due to COVID restrictions, many of the activities the group had planned were canceled, and we needed to adapt and come up with activities that were more in line with the precautions. The billboard advertising is just one form of messaging that gets people's attention, and we hope to give it a chance. So using kind of a splash and ripple analogy, we expect this billboard will spark conversations and get people thinking about others, examining their own unconscious biases. It's in the ripple zone that projects and activities can really generate some important social change. We hope it'll lead to more curiosity and a heightened sensitivity to racism and discrimination in Fort Macleod and neighboring communities. And we're hopeful, then we expect some more respectful dialogue and kindness to others.
So I would assume you're strongly supporting this billboard design?
Well, this billboard design, yeah, it was changed on, tweaked and adjusted from our postcards that we've been handing out, and it has been approved by the Alberta Human Rights Fund, who funds the project. So,
Councillor Monteith.
You can have too much verbiage on a sign, so is this going to show up? Is it going to be large enough that people can look at it and see it and not strain to figure out what it's saying?
we believe it could be. It'll be the billboard. It's to be put on in the town's rotation by the Tim Hortons. We're hopeful it will be. I know when you did say that there is lots of words and we're hoping to catch people's attention, and but it's hard to leave out one and then not the other thing, and we felt all aspects of it were quite important to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
Yeah, it's just if it's too small, people can't read it. That'd be my only concern, but I don't know. So I'll trust your judgment.
Okay, Councillor Orr.
Just one mitigating factor to that concern, and that is a concern with any billboard, of course, is that the location of this particular billboard, there is lots of traffic that is really quite slow. I mean, the highway traffic going past is a little bit faster, not too fast, we hope. But, you know, just with the amount of people just approaching the highway, and they're not at highway speed. So I'm hopeful that it will be effective. I'd like to just make a comment about the billboard itself. I really appreciate the approach that you've taken, and think that it is very inclusive, which shouldn't be surprising, given the nature of your group. So really appreciate the approach that you've taken and how inclusive it is, and would hope that it would spark positive rather than divisive feelings, and I really feel like it is a positive message to share, so thank you.
Councillor Van Nagabos.
I second those comments 100%.
Any other comments? I definitely appreciate what's here as well. I think it's very much speaks volumes to the message that we want to present, so I would strongly support this as well. Councillor Edwards.
Seeing as I sit on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I better support it. I would like to make a couple comments about some of the specific images. We did make some adjustments, and the one that I really wanted to focus on was the look like you. It used to be a pair of glasses, but it was brought to our attention that the symbol that's used here is a First Nations symbol that they often use to represent an individual. So we wanted to make sure that we were really representing our Indigenous neighbors as well. And so I'm quite happy with the way it's turned out, and I think hopefully, Jim, it will be big enough that people will be able to read it. I know I will as I go to get a Blizzard at Dairy Queen and creep by. I think I'll be okay. So hopefully, there's a lot of people in line for Blizzards these days, so hopefully they'll all read it.
I've sat in enough ball games and looked at things out in the outfield and said, who is that and what does that say? So that's my only concern, is that usually bigger is better.
Yeah, and if we had a bigger billboard that we could put it on, I'm sure we would do that.
Very good. Do we need a motion?
We
on
do need a
this?
motion, and if it's okay, I would like to make the motion to approve the Diversity and Inclusion Committee's proposal for this billboard to be put into the rotation on the Town of Fort Macleod billboard.
All right. The motion is on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Is there anything else that council could do as part of rollout for a billboard like this? In some ways, if we all got together and took a picture around it, that might speak volumes as well. I don't know.
I was going to suggest something similar once it's up. That would be a great idea. I think one of the main initiatives or one of the main thought processes with our group was we were hoping that it would spark conversation, and that people would be a little bit more open to recognizing our differences and yet being able to have those respectful dialogues where we can recognize that you and I might not agree on something, but we can still be kind to each other and respect each other's beliefs. And so I think that's the biggest hope for this. So it would be wonderful if council would be willing to take a picture and do that. I'm sure the Diversity and Inclusion Committee will be doing the same.
That's something you would add to your motion?
Yes, I will add that town council takes a photo
Once it comes out?
once it's out for use, however it's seen fit.
If administration could organize that for us, that'd be great. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Yes. Push it one.
Mayor Fader, excuse me, just a point of order. Did we forget bylaw 1928 under consideration of delegation in terms of process, or did I miss something?
1929?
1928.
1928 we did do. 1929 was not required, from my understanding. It's for public hearing.
That's right. Under consideration of delegations and public hearings, did we address bylaw 1928?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure we did. Is that in the minutes? I believe so. Yeah, you got that. Okay, thank you. New business item 2, 2020 financial statements. Director of Finance, Chris Holback.
Good evening again, Council. As you well know, the audited consolidated financial statements for the town of Fort Macleod for 2020 are complete. Our auditors, Calvin Scott, did a presentation with council earlier tonight. So we're going to show a pre-recorded presentation by Avail regarding the 2020 financial statements, so everyone in the audience can also see how our financial year went last year. And then I would like council to approve the audited consolidated financial statements of the town of Fort Macleod for 2020 after this video. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the financial statement presentation for the town of Fort Macleod for the 2020 year end. I'm Calvin Scott, partner at Avail CPA, and I will be your presenter for this evening. Get things started, we'll run through what we'll cover. The independent auditor's report, we'll run through it quickly. We'll go through the financial results, and then we'll touch on one or two notes to the financial statements. The independent auditor's report. First things first, we had a clean opinion, so the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. Management is responsible for these statements, as one of the other things included in the independent auditor's report. It also notes that council is responsible for the oversight of management. And our responsibility as auditors is to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, make sure we understand the internal controls, evaluating the policies and the estimates made by the town, including on the going concern assumption, which means you have the ability to continue operating into the future, and to evaluate the presentation of the financial statements. Again, we had no issues with any of these, thus a clean opinion. Financial results for the year, we'll start with revenues in comparison to last year. On an overall basis, revenues decreased by about $3.5 million. The main reason for this is going to be the gain on sale of tangible capital assets. So in the prior year, we saw the sale of the electrical distribution system, and that netted about 3.1 in sales. So that's going to increase the revenue significantly for a prior year. Some other items that may have adjusted during the year. We're going to see a little increase in taxes, mainly related to industrial and linear tax increases. There's also some changes in the operating grants, so transfers from operating. We're going to see that down about $460,000. Last year, that included a disaster grant to fix the water main, which is floating in the river. And that was offset this year by the MOST grant, some COVID funding. The investment income was up about 150, so there was a little bit more invested from last year in comparison to last year, and some better rates. Big market recovery in the second half, so we did well on that side of things. On an overall basis, rentals were another item that was down significantly and mostly due to COVID. So again, revenues were down about $3.5 million from the prior year. On the expenditure side of things, the expenses for the year decreased as well, not quite as big, by about $746,000 compared to last year. So again, one of the big ticket items here would be the electrical distribution expenses that were down about $222,000. You can see in the bottom line. Legislative costs were down due to COVID, so less travel and conventions going on. We're going to see administrative down, administrative costs, less spending throughout the year. Again, reflection of COVID happening, so less marketing, legal performed. Protective services, we'll have a decrease here of about $461,000. This would be where the expenditures related to the water line repairs were for the prior year. We discussed the grant earlier. This is the offsetting expenditure. Didn't happen this year, so we'll see a decrease there. Roads are up about $131,000. Some unexpected road work that needed to happen this year, so that increased in that area. There was also large decreases in parks and rec, so we'll see about $247,000 down there. With the closures due to COVID, pool, arena, we're going to see some definite decreases on the expense side here. And the same goes for culture and museums. With COVID closures, there's going to be less expenditures there. So once again, our expenditures are down about $746,000 in comparison to last year. So what does this look like on an overall basis? We see the decreased revenues by 3.5. We'll see the decrease in expenditures by about 746. So that leaves the town with a deficiency of excess over revenues before other of about $317,000. Now after this, we take into account capital revenues that come in, which are about 2.1 million, and some contributed assets. These are non-cash that came in during the year. So this is going to lead us to an overall surplus of about $2.1 million. And we have to take into account that this surplus doesn't include transfers to or from reserves. It doesn't include any capital expenditures made during the year. It doesn't include any long-term debt repayments principal portion. So there are some items that need to be factored into this that aren't included. So I want to run you through a little bit of a reconciliation on what the real surplus would be. We can see that we start here with $2.1 million combined surplus, just as we were on the last page. Now, if we were to take this and split it out like we have years and years ago in the old school format, we would have split out capital and operating. So we've removed amortization here and gone through splitting out what the surplus would be from capital and operating. You can see as we bring it down and adjust for all those non-cash items and other items that aren't shown on the statement of income, that we actually come out with about a break even for capital and just around a $1 million surplus for the year, real surplus from operations. We'll now move to the financial assets. So this is essentially, other than tangible capital assets, so the buildings and roads and equipment that the town owns, this is going to be what the town owns as of December 31st. So we'll see a significant increase in cash. This is offset by pretty much the same decrease in the investment. So just a transfer of GICs from long-term to short-term. On the taxes and grants receivable, we'll see a little bit of an increase in the tax side. Generally, this is because of slower collections during the year, some flexibility during the COVID year for payments. The trade and other receivables, we'll see about $1 million decrease here. In the prior year, there was some significant grant funding, both provincial and federal, that was due to the town but not yet received. That came in during the year, so we'll see a big decrease there. On an overall basis, though, we'll see a decrease of about $1.2 million in the financial asset side. Now that's going to be offset with a decrease of about $1 million in the liability side, or what the town owes. And the big change here is going to be in the deferred revenue side. So those grants would have come in that we were waiting for last year. They would have come into deferred revenue and then they would have been spent. So we're going to see some good grants being spent, both capital and operating, that would have been, just capital that would have been in deferred revenue. So this is going to be any unspent, externally restricted grants. And that's where our big decrease is in the liability side this year. Long-term debt was paid back as per required payments, and no new debt came in this year. And it leaves the town with a net financial asset position, $10.4 million. And that's a great position to be in as a town. There are municipalities out there that are in a net debt position. What this tells you is that you could take all of those financial assets, the things you owe, or owned, as of December 31st, and pay off all of your debts, everything you owe, and still be left with $10 million at that point in time. So a significant amount of money left over and a great financial position for the town. The non-financial assets, so the tangible capital assets, we'll see some major additions this year. We're including the pool addition. There's about 1.5 spent on that up to the end of the year. There was also the Southwest Industrial Utility upgrade that happened for about $1.8 million. So those are the big additions into the tangible capital assets. The accumulated surplus, or essentially the net worth of the town, at the end of December 31st, you can see the breakdown here. There was an unrestricted surplus of about the same as last year, $1.9 million. Internally restricted surplus is down about $600,000. This is the reserves. There was some transfers in and out, a net decrease of about $600,000. And then we'll see an increase in the equity and tangible capital assets. So there was about $3 million net invested into tangible capital assets during the year. So overall basis, the health of the organization has increased from about 56 million to 58 million, which is great to see. A nice, healthy community and a nice, healthy set of financial statements. The last thing I'll take you to is one of the notes to the financial statements. This has been put into every set of financial statements. It is a COVID-19 note, just to remind us that there's still uncertainty out there, and we are uncertain of the impact that may or may not have on the town, but we have included this as a disclosure to the financial statements. And that is the end of the presentation.
All right. So the 6:30 presentation will not be on the YouTube, right? No, both will be then? Just this one, okay, yeah. So that's good to have. So I believe the request is to have our financial statements for 2020 approved as presented. Councillor Monteith wants to make the motion. Very well. Any further discussion? Debate? What's there to debate? Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to get some.
I'll just make one comment. As we received information on the audit and, a very favorable audit, kudos were given to our administration, and I would just like to echo those. It's nice to know that we're on top of what's happening in the community financially. So appreciate that very much.
I don't think he mentioned that in this presentation either, that we were the first ones to get started on this year's audit and the first ones to be complete. So that's always good to highlight as well.
And from my position as Director of Finance, I just wanted to say that we didn't have auditors on site at all due to COVID, so everything was done remotely. So there was no one here sampling, there was no one checking our systems, there was no people here, so everything was done electronically. And I kind of fumbled with it at the start of the audit, and then I got my groove on. So I think I can even tighten this up next year if we do it electronically again. I think we could maybe have this like the beginning of March, our audit done. So that's my goal.
Yeah, and there's
I'm
nothing wrong
excited.
with that. Yeah, absolutely. Hold on.
So we could technically ask for a reduction in our rates with Avail, or what?
So for Avail, we've locked them into a 5-year contract with very low rates and no increases. So yeah, we're
happy.
Maybe I could just like make it, I don't know.
A donation to the pool.
Ooh, that's something.
Oh, thank you. All right. Yeah, exactly. They've been defended. That's good. All right. So thank you very much for that. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Chris? No? If there's no other questions, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Very good. Item number 3, we'll pass this over to our CIO Sue Keenan on the skateboard park.
Let's see if I can get my groove on too. As council's aware, with the modernization of the outdoor pool, we had to give up the skateboard park space as well as the tennis court space. We were fortunate enough to have a meeting a few weeks ago with Mr. Barrett Goodrich, who was one of the original founding members of the skateboard park decades ago. Him and his family have moved back to the town of Fort McLeod, so we quite enjoyed that conversation with him. There was lots of things that we discussed about the skateboard park. Some of them are included in your package. What we came up with was 4 potential sites as possibilities for relocation of the skateboard park, and these are not in any special order. Centennial Park, Garrison Estates, the Water Street Triangle Green Space, which is kind of an iffy one, and of course, Westwind Sports Park. These are locations that we hope to advertise and identify as possible locations as we garner support and feedback from our residents and businesses through a public engagement process. Tonight's recommendation is that council accepts administration's recommendation to move forward with public engagement with town residents to provide for options with respect to the relocation, in case we've missed any, of the skateboard park for installation in the summer of 2021. Once completed, a recommendation will come back to council, which would request approval for that relocation. Now, we're a bit limited, as council knows, with the ongoing issues around COVID. It would have been my preference to have face-to-face public engagement in the community hall. We're going to see what we can do with that in terms of social distancing. In the event we can't, we would utilize all social media available to us. We're hoping to start with a SurveyMonkey survey with some photos and some ideas and some comments and lots of questions. And then we'll move on from there.
Very good. I have an initial question. Tennis courts were removed. We have no replacement for those. The outdoor skating rink was removed, and there's no. Could that be joined into this consultation? So we request feedback. Maybe no one wants an outdoor rink. Maybe no one wants a skateboard park, and at least we can get as much feedback as possible at the same time.
Absolutely, we could. That's not an issue. We use the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was completed at the beginning of 2018 that council reviewed and saw. There's been one inquiry about the tennis courts. That's it since they've been taken down. Of course, now it's spring and summer, so there may be a few more. But no issue with including them in an overall presentation. And we can bring that back, sure.
Okay, so is someone prepared to make a motion to do a public consult on those 3 items? Councillor Edwards? Yeah, for sure.
With this motion, does that mean that you're going to go forward with the proposed sites here, or can we discuss those first?
Really, we had to identify green space. As far as I know, there isn't any other green space, so those are all the locations we actually have, unless we've missed something, but we're open to that if we've missed an area.
I'm not proposing that you've missed one. I just think we should remove one because I don't think it's.
The Water Street Triangle Park?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we just shouldn't even put that one out there. That's my personal opinion. I just don't think that it's safe or an ideal location by any means, but that's my opinion. It would just be less choices. So I think if we can narrow it down ahead of time, we'll get better feedback.
I totally agree with that. We just wanted to make sure we didn't miss any green space.
I know the space that I always question is the space from the hospital to 6th Avenue along the highway. It's kind of a dead space. You can't use it for any developments. We use that for piling snow, but it's kind of an untidy location, and we have trees planted there. I think it would be quite a nice big area to be used. It's not currently zoned public institutional, but that can be changed. That's one location I always, in my mind, try to figure out what we can do with that area.
I would agree to look at that area. It is, it would look nicer developed than it is right now. Something to consider. And if we're talking locations, I haven't looked at and I can't get a map to see, but is there any space in by the old Scout Hall in that area just to the north of the Scout Hall? Is there sufficient room there?
There wouldn't be enough space, and that area is currently used quite a bit for programming in the spring and summer by various community groups, so it would not be ideal.
Okay.
Director of Operations, Adrian, did you have a comment? Looked like you were itching to grab your mic earlier.
No, just in terms of that space just beside the health center there, we've considered that internally. Like pedestrian access isn't great there, so that's kind of the only
That's
hurdle
hard.
there.
I know.
So if there's no crosswalks, not necessarily a sidewalk there, so you would be promoting traffic crossing 6th Ave there. So it's the only consideration there.
Yeah, it may require more fencing and so on, just to divert traffic
sure.
to certain areas, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion, motions on the floor? If council has any other recommendations for locations, I think staff would love to hear those thoughts and comments. I know the West Winds area is, in some ways, is too far out, right? It's for those that are wanting to do a little bit of biking and skateboarding. It's quite a ways to get to for those, but. Yeah, see you, Keenan?
We are doing some work with ORSC on the future development of West Winds Park in terms of a total regional sports hub and play area. So there will be some information coming back to you on that. And that's why we included the skateboard park in that particular park area. It wasn't just for accommodating present day, it's for future growth and of the municipality moving down the road.
And I assume the school said no to locating it on any of their locations, right? Not just the FP Walsh area that we had originally talked about. All right, so if there's no further discussion, we look forward to some more consultation and feedback on that and seeing if there's a clear path forward. So call it to question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And if I understand correct, we have no reports and no committee reports at this meeting, so we will ask for a motion to go in camera for one personnel item. It's 8:44. Councillor Edwards makes that motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.